Thank you so much for that introduction, and also for having me here and putting together this amazing day. There's lots of super interesting stuff, and I think I recognize some of the things that Chris just told you about, but I come at it from a slightly different angle. So I hope our talks are kind of complementary, but this is also the first time I saw his talk. So yeah, and I'd like to talk a little bit about the work we do in the Cultural Heritage Lab and or the Cultural AI Lab and the Digital Humanities Lab, that they're kind of connected. So yeah, a lot of data has been digitized from cultural heritage institutions and elsewhere, but we work a lot with these archives, and they're put into computers. But then what, right? To access them, you often can't see the forest for the trees anymore. So we need to do smart things in order to really work with this kind of data. So I'd like to talk a little bit about the kind of cross-disciplinary challenges that I face in my collaborations with humanities scholars and cultural heritage professionals. And I don't think this is going to be much of a surprise, right? There's challenges in terms of data. You know, data might be dirty, data might be in all sorts of weird formats that computers are not really equipped to deal with. Also technology challenges, especially if you look at older languages, for example, if you look at natural language processing, but also if you want to put all this kind of information into databases, concepts change meaning over time. So how do you deal with that in your data? And actually, you know, the first two challenges are also connected. So there's definitely like a gap or a mismatch between data and technology often. And there's also cultural and youth challenges, of course, you know, coming at it from different disciplines with different backgrounds, especially when collaborating in these kind of settings, that might also need some extra attention that I'd like to also get your attention for, so that if you start working in these kind of projects, that you're aware of this. So one of the things we did, and actually are still working on, is to analyze recipes. One of the challenges of this little project was to see how we can analyze recipes from newspapers. Well, so on the left-hand side, you see the scan from the newspaper, and on the right-hand side, you see what the OCR makes of it, the optical character recognition, and automatically trying to read this text. So that is what we're going to have to work with, and that is what our NLP tools are going to have to work with. So I'm going to explain this project in a little bit. The second use case I have is about the Cultural AI Lab. And I'm not going to be talking a lot about this use case. So this is actually written before the lab was created, but one of our co-directors in the lab, Jakob Rossberger, was an author on this. And this is really the kind of motivation for setting up the lab. So what my colleagues did was they looked at the Dutch National Library's newspaper archive, so looked at 100 million articles and about 6 months of server logs. And they just tried to sort of see, if we look at the kind of things people query for in this data, what comes back? Well, what are the things they query for, and also what are the results that are going to come back, right? So what they really found is that 96% of the articles never make it into the top 10 of the retrieved articles. So that basically means you've got this amazing archive, and people are only really looking at this tiny portion of it. So, and how do you, if you want to do the kind of research that humanities scholars do, how do you know what is actually happening in that search engine? And also, how do you make sure that you do get all the other stuff up, right? How would you get access to those kind of things if the search engine by itself is not giving that to you? So in the Cultural AI Lab, we really want to sort of have this interplay between AI and culture and human use of this kind of technology, and then really also bring the domain knowledge into these AI systems. So that's a little bit about the motivation, and I really recommend reading this paper. I'll tell you a little bit more about the recipe analysis that we did. And this was worked together with Melvin Wevers and Hugo Hoedeman. So yeah, we're kind of interested. We started this kind of as foodies ourselves, and but then it turns out that a lot of our colleagues at the Royal Netherlands Academy Humanities Cluster were also interested in food. And of course, also people outside, so dietitians, and a lot of, there is of course a lot of dietary information available, but not really historic, and that's hard to access because it's not in the kind of databases that nutritionists use. And if you know what people used to eat, that might actually help you understand their current eating patterns, knowing what culture they came from, what kind of food traditions. So we thought, well, how about we just analyze 50 years of recipes from newspapers. We could have also looked at cookbooks, but newspapers are sort of, you know, they cater to different audiences. Plus, I mean, some cookbooks have been in print for decades. So we thought that newspapers would actually give a bit more of a current indication of what people, what the eating tradition was. As we think it's good research to share your data and code, so you can find that on GitHub. Actually, so this started as a very small project at a hackathon. A hackathon organized by the Dutch Digital Heritage Network. They're actually organizing a hackathon again in November this year. It's good fun, so if you're interested or you think your students might be interested, please do sign up. If you Google Hackalod, you'll find it. So I kind of already talked about this, so that the newspapers contain the views of daily life and customs. So, I mean, if you search for recipes, you get a bit of an imprecise setback, because in Dutch, for example, recipe also means prescription for medicine. And actually a lot of older newspapers, they also contain all these recipes for home remedies that are really medicine. So how do we actually detect the medicines? Or sorry, how do we actually detect food recipes? And there's also noise from the digitization process that we need to deal with. The Dutch National Library has digitized an amazing amount of text. So this is an older dump that we used. You can sort of see the stats in this table, but we've got basically nearly 49,000 articles, pages available, 8 million articles, and that's a hell of a lot of words. We only really look at the newer ones. Everyone can access delphi.nl to look at newspapers and search them. You can also download individual articles if you want to use them for research purposes. If it's from before 1876, there's no copyrights and no GDPR problems, so that's made available. And for research purposes, it's often possible to get in touch with the National Library to get access to the API or data dumps. Here's our recipe, really lovely 70s recipe. I haven't tried it, but it doesn't look too appealing to me, to be honest. So we looked at the OCR quality. On the left-hand side, you see the OCR quality per newspaper, and on the right-hand side, you see it over time. What we did here is we looked at how many words that are, you know, in the text that we have from the newspapers are also in a dictionary, right? So the OCR tools often report per character scores. We looked at the per word scores, and you sort of see that what is it, between 65 and 70. The OCR is just a little bit worse. Don't delete any of these articles with a lower OCR quality, but we do provide that information in the data set so that people who do the analysis can decide themselves whether they want to use these data or not. Then we've got it looks like a really complicated pipeline, but I'll talk you through it. We basically use the Albert Heijn recipes as examples of, hey, this is what a recipe looks like, this is what ingredients look like. They also have recipe tags, so it says like it's Italian or vegetarian, or it's festive for Christmas, or dinner, breakfast, and the descriptions as well. And then what we did from Delphi, so the National Library's newspaper corpus, we first have some seed lists like tablespoon and kilogram, and we just select a whole bunch of articles. And we then look using the examples we have from what a recipe looks like. We create a machine learning algorithm to teach the computer to recognize which of all these things that we gathered that also contain non-recipes are actually recipes. That's text classification, so that gives us the actual recipes. And then we actually we try to extract the ingredients and the quantities from it, and we also tag it so we can actually give people the information, hey, this is probably vegetarian. Then what we also did is try to connect it to Wikipedia, which is basically a database version of Wikipedia. That gives the scientific name and the origin. So this was really the first step into also kind of investigating whether these dishes are kind of local or whether we get it from all over elsewhere, all over everywhere. This is really kind of tricky. I'm actually involved in a project right now, funded by the Alpro Foundation, that I can hopefully tell more about soon. It is already on our website, but we're working really, really hard to get the system up. To get, for example, greenhouse gas emissions and impact. Also, we would really like to bring in local food as well. Whether something is locally grown or coming from elsewhere, but that is a bit hard to get by. That basically gives us our data set of structured and enriched newspaper articles over a span of 50 years. So some of the problems that we encounter here, and that really also prove that you can't just use out-of-the-box natural language processing technology that's been developed to do information extraction on contemporary, nicely digital-born data. So there are some issues with the article segmentation. So the KB has tried to actually say, well, this is where an article begins and this is where it ends. But it doesn't always work, and also some of these recipes, they actually contain an entire menu, so it's one article but it's got like 3 recipes in it, and the OCR errors really prevent us from using standard and natural language processing pipelines. So these pipelines very often start with checking what type of word something is in a sentence, so you know that an adjective is followed by, for example, a noun. But because of the OCR stuff, this just gets horribly wrong, so you can't use that. So we really had to revert to using a lexicon-based strategy. But then what we also did is we sort of, we wanted to know how good is our system, but also what the impact is of these OCR errors. And there's now actually a whole host of work done, for example, also at the British Library by Barbara McGillivray, and Daniel Van Strien on like what is the impact of OCR errors on downstream natural language processing tasks. So basically, we also marked up kind of OCR errors and just see how bad it was, like how many words were there where we have OCR errors that we really wanted to do something with. I'm just quickly going to gloss over this. So basically, we have a new data set that contains 27,000 recipes. They're Dutch. So if you don't speak Dutch, then come talk to me to see if we can do this for English as well. Actually, I have some apple pie recipes lying around for English and German. And we have links to external sources, so you can actually give me all the recipes that have tomatoes in it and stuff. Yeah, so it really, really matters what you do with OCRs, and I think that this community here, this is something that we need to spend time on and effort. So this was really a collaboration between a lot of different parties. Now, I'd also really like to tell you something a little bit about the Culture AI Lab, and that's really about using AI for understanding human culture and using the knowledge and expertise from humanities to analyze and improve AI technology, because kind of my experience, sometimes in digital humanities projects is that it's not really a two-way street. There's very often a humanities scholar who wants to do something digital, some AI technology, particularly with a developer is brought in, but really the kind of deep knowledge that this humanities scholar has does not get fed back into the AI to really make it smarter and feel better with these kind of things. Of course, there are exceptions, but this does still happen a lot, so that's why we kind of really wanted to put this on the map with this lab. So there's kind of 4 main themes that we want to tackle. So bias is one big one, ethics, cultural differences, and perspective. So also one of the things you saw in the paper I referenced at the top of my presentation, that you very often only get the tip of the iceberg or the most popular kind of articles in the search engine. So that's really a particular kind of perspective. High frequency things, a lot of these search engines work on the super frequent things, and then the voices that are less well represented in a data set, they often don't get to come to the fore. So we also want to do something with that. So polyvocality is another term that we deal with this here. I mean, we did think this up kind of before COVID. So the idea is that our PhD students and researchers, they spend time at the academic and heritage partners. As it happened, the majority of the past year they've basically spent in their home offices. But as soon as we can, we will get together again. We do also have a monthly reading club that you can also join, even if you're not formally part of the lab. Just shoot me an email. And we, when it's possible again, do joint conference and workshop visits, although we also write papers together already. And there's also various ways that you can become a member of the Cultural AI Lab. It's not that we aspire to having 50 members, but if these are kind of themes that you're really interested in and want to work on, also get in touch with us. So one of the things, for example, about bias is that, you know, there's bias in the data. There's bias introduced by tool creators simply because they come at it from a particular perspective. And there's also technological bias, as I mentioned. For example, a lot of search engines are very much based on frequencies, and another kind of statistics are as well. So that actually impacts the kind of things you can do with those kind of tools. There's of course also, you know, in data, not everything was preserved. Not everything can be preserved. Some of the data, you know, some of the archives and collections are hundreds and hundreds of years old, so it might just not be there. But we do want to know what the gaps are and potentially what influences that. So we really want to make this bias visible. We're actually also part of a bigger ecosystem. So it's part of the Innovation Center for Artificial Intelligence, which has several labs in the Netherlands. And that's really also a way to exchange information with various other parties like the police, Ahold, Delhaize, but also companies, to see what's happening in that field. We currently have various projects and some projects starting soon as well. So it's really getting some mass. A lot of these ICAI labs, they are created by one big, basically one party that says, here's a big bag of money and go hire 5 PhD students. It's not how it worked for us. None of our partners, cultural heritage institutions, they don't have that big bags of money. So basically, and also we thought it might be nicer actually to do this with multiple partners. So we basically write lots of project proposals, as I'm sure a lot of people here do too, and we're very lucky that we got some funded to create this amazing group of young researchers. So a little bit about how, you know, kind of cultural obstacles to cross-disciplinary collaborations or obstacles or kind of like difficulties. Actually had a even last week, we were talking about, you know, there was a conference and we had to go present something, and the humanities researcher in our team goes like, yeah, I still need to prepare my paper. And I'm like, paper? I thought it was just a presentation. So first of all, a lot of computer science people, we don't really write out our entire presentations. as maybe some other researchers do, but also, you know, when we just use the term paper, we already mean something different. And he just meant it as a presentation. And for me, a paper is really something that I've written and it's gone through review and then it gets published, whereas at humanities conferences as well, maybe afterwards, eventually it gets published. At computer science conferences, you send in a complete paper, it needs to be finished, the work, and it gets reviewed, and then it like almost immediately gets published if it gets accepted. Right? So those are kind of things, it may seem obvious, but you really need to be aware of those when you work together. So very often what we try to do is get people together, have them brainstorm together, and really, you know, ask questions, ask as many questions as you can at the silliest detail. Read each other's papers. So when we started the Europa project, a big European project on olfactory heritage, what we did, we basically asked every work package lead, so every discipline involved in the project, to select one core publication from their domain that they wanted everyone on the team to read in order to just, you know, for computer vision, for semantic web, for natural language processing, just to get an idea of what we were all doing from history, from museology. So we wanted to do this, instead we did a lot of this, also fun, not as much fun. But then also especially what we did for this project, because of course it's very much about smells, and which is so profoundly not digital, that we actually started shipping around scents, as well as mugs to all the team members, so to really sort of still create like a little bit of a team spirit and a team feeling, rather than, you know, everyone just sitting at home feeling really isolated. So I don't know if this is the way to do it, we're just figuring out as we go, but you know, being able to smell some of these things really kind of brings the project to life. So if you can think of something to do there as well for your projects, I highly recommend thinking out of the box there. Yeah, so basically what I kind of wanted to say is that custom domains, they really require custom solutions. And for that, we often need the domain expertise. We could not have built these kind of tools if we hadn't been working with humanities researchers and cultural heritage professionals that just know the data, that just know the domain. And we really try to keep it fun as well, given the kind of constraints we have. If you want to know a little bit more about the projects that we do at the Digital Humanities Lab and also the Cultural AI Lab, the website URL is on the next page. We've got like super different projects, so there's something in it for everyone. Thank you for your attention.